Hi guys, welcome to the Liberty Bunker, the last battle of Brexit. This really is the Remainers' last stand. However, I do expect them to fight as hard and dirty as possible to make the most of this final battle. So the EU was due to come to London this week to speak with the UK government, negotiations, try and work out a plan going forward, how the trade deal, how the future relations between the UK and EU will play out. Now, due to coronavirus has been a big wild card in this whole Brexit scenario. We thought we were there, 8 weeks ago, 16 weeks ago. We thought, okay, now we're going to leave on paper, do this 1 year or less than 1 year transitional period to the 31st of December. We got Boris Johnson doing the right things, saying all the right noises that we would leave on the 31st of December this year. However, coronavirus is something of a wild card now. So the face-to-face talks in London have been cancelled this week. We have just the usual faces from the Remainer side, David Lammy, Ed David, who is the Lib Dem interim leader since Joe Swinson has gone, calling for a delay. Only expect this noise to get worse. Now, we know how the EU play games. They will manipulate British politicians. They will manipulate the British media to really push this final battle because the EU will use the corona situation now as an excuse to delay transitional period beyond the 31st of December. It's clear the EU need money now, especially coronavirus will only accelerate or exacerbate the need for finances within the EU. This ultimately, coronavirus has the potential to bring down the EU, has a very high potential of bringing down the Eurozone Monetary Union project. I don't see any way that Italy can carry on functioning as a country for more than a few months now. It's on its knees. It always was on its knees, but this is just a bullet to the brain of the Italian economy, as well as others, as well as Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Greece. I don't know how they're going to function after this. Now, the extension, if there's going to be an extension past the 31st of December, it needs to be agreed by June from both sides, from the EU and the UK government. Boris Johnson certainly saying all the right things that this won't happen. However, coronavirus, again, the wildcard coronavirus, the UK government is pursuing this high-risk, high-reward strategy for dealing with coronavirus, while most Western countries, certainly most countries within Europe, are adopting this kind of lockdown policy and have been doing so for a few weeks now. Boris Johnson has maintained keeping the schools open. Now we are entering more of a period of the lockdown phase, but it's quite vague. No one really too sure what the UK government are doing. This will be high risk. Ultimately, it's high risk, high reward. It may pay dividends, or it may blow up in Boris Johnson's face. Now, Boris Johnson will quite likely, as the months continue, as the deaths in the UK initially, at least in the short term, will probably start creeping higher than other European nations where we haven't adopted this full-scale lockdown policy. It's likely our death rate will spike higher than other EU countries, but potentially in the long term, we're probably going to pan this thing out over a longer period of time. So it is high risk, it is high reward. No one's too sure which way is the best way of doing it, but when you do something contrarian to nearly every other country, you put your head on the block, and if it goes wrong, Boris Johnson faces a lot of problems, potentially even calls for him to step down, potentially the threat of a vote of no confidence. I mean, that is unlikely because the Tories hold a significant majority, but you never know. You never know how many of these MPs have been re-elected go back to their Remainer ways, because certainly a lot of the Tory MPs that are sitting in Parliament still are Remainers, and if it looks like an opportunity to overthrow Boris Johnson, I certainly wouldn't say that they aren't necessarily going to take that opportunity to do so, given that this is a bit of a black swan. No one really saw this coming. Now, I think the UK must leave now. Even if it's under WTO terms, I don't think WTO is even that bad, especially with everything that's going on with coronavirus. Now, looking at pretty much a global shock anyway, so WTO, if you were saying WTO 2-3 years ago, it might have been sort of scary, but with the new paradigm we're now living in with just total global chaos, pretty much every country in the world now going into recession, WTO won't even be that bad, and in fact, it's probably a good time to do it, if any. Italy is in complete meltdown. The Eurozone is in meltdown. We need to get as far away from this project as possible. This really is a sinking ship. The EU's been a sinking ship for a long time, but coronavirus has blasted a massive hole in it and it's taken on a huge amount of water. I think a Euro collapse is probably quite probable. The most dangerous thing with the EU is they will try and save this project at any cost. We know that. We know that the powers that be within the EU will try and save this project at any cost. It's like the final days of the Soviet Union. No one would admit defeat until the whole thing crumbles, which is dangerous. You don't really want to be aligned with any sort of project like that, because who knows how crazy it will be before the thing, ultimately, that they won't let countries leave. They won't let the thing dissolve in a reasonable, controlled demolition controlled demolition way. It's just going to be a total collapse, and we want to be as far away from that as possible. It's really worrying times. I'll be surprised even if Italy can make it, another 6, 12, 18 months, because things really are that dire. Obviously, they're going to print huge amounts of money, and that will go some way to at least kicking the can down the road. But ultimately, this sinking ship, we need to be as far away from it as possible. But certainly interesting times for Boris Johnson. This really is the last stand for the Remainers now. I don't think they are going to waste this opportunity. They will fight this with every last breath they have. It'd be interesting to see how it plays out. I expect the EU to be heavily manipulating their Remainer friends in Parliament, as well as manipulating their friends in the UK media. It's going to get pretty dirty. Over the next few months, it's going to get pretty dirty. Hopefully Boris Johnson stands by his guns, but he is going to be taking a lot of flack from his coronavirus policy. Even if it's the right thing, even if history proves it's the right thing to do, it's certainly going to be a bumpy 3-6 months while this initial phase of higher deaths comes in, ultimately to hopefully reap the dividends of being able to get our economy back on track quicker than other countries potentially can. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this. Are the Remainers going to fight this dirty, as I expect, or is this going to be smooth sailing? Is Boris Johnson going to extend? I mean, it really is a wild card. Coronavirus really is a wild card for Brexit now. Everything was going so well. Do you trust Boris Johnson? I think he is a bit of a flippy floppy fish. He kind of goes with what's ever popular. So I do worry if he thinks there's enough popular opinion that just to kick it down the road another 6 months, just say maybe extend out to June 2021 or 1 year, 2 years, however long they would maybe choose. I don't know. Interesting one anyway. Jason from Liberty Bunker signing off. That's my thoughts and opinions today, and I'll see you in the next video.